ESPN, NFL Draft. Also, his thoughts, he tweeted out this morning, still shaking my head this morning over Sam Bradford. I grinded every day to stay on the field through 2 drafted tight ends drove me. What drives him? I'd like to say that sounds like it's agreeable, Ant, but I don't know that I could agree with you in this situation. How are you, pal?
What's up, buddy? How you doing, Mike?
Doing good, man. And, let me ask you, when you were drafted in the first round by the Jets, did they have an established tight end on that team? I mean, was there somebody there that made it a weird situation?
Yeah, Fred Baxter was in his 9th season, I believe, a travel veteran player who had been there a few years, kind of a Parcells guy. And, he was more or less, wasn't an impact player, but a guy that understood the ropes. And I remember walking into the locker room and, it was kind of one of those, it wasn't an initial hug-out session when you first saw him. I mean, you kind of earned your stripes, and I just tried to look and listen and not say too much and try to, feed off anything you could give me, whether it be something he said to me or didn't say to me. I was trying to better myself as a player, but there was someone in place, and I knew I had to compete.
All right, so Bradford, this whole situation I find to be very interesting. He signs a deal on March the 1st, okay? It's a weird situation. They give him this kind of prove-it deal. Now, at that time he signs that deal, they are picking 13th in the draft. Here he is now. They have traded up to number 2. Do you see where he would be frustrated if they never told him, hey, by the way, we're going to do whatever we can to try to trade up and find your replacement? Does that make it a tough spot for him?
I mean, I don't know. I mean, you say he signed a prove-it deal. Do you know what he's making next year?
Well, he's making good money. There's no question about it.
Yeah, he's making top-tier money for that year. I mean, listen, he's getting paid starter money to come out and play next year. I mean, listen, if he wants that money in that big second contract, he's already made a ton of money. That really has nothing to do with it. Go out there, win the job. It shouldn't matter. If they bring an incumbent in, and then you know what? Go out there and prove him wrong and make him stay on the sideline as long as possible and do your job. I mean, he's in his 7th season now. He's been on 2 teams, and he has not delivered the goods that we saw he can deliver in college. And I think everybody's waiting for that. And last year, you could say what you want. It was a plug play, try to situation with Chip Kelly, try to get that offense going, but he didn't make enough plays on the field when the time was right. Now, there's some other things. Guys drop balls, do this. But I saw plenty of plays left on the field at the quarterback position where I think he could have been a better player, and he's got to continue to prove that.
And I agree. Look, he doesn't deserve anything. And I think part of this was he needs to go out and earn this situation. Now, let me ask you this, Ant. You say he needs to go out and win the job. He's going to be the starter. But when you draft a guy number 2 overall, what chance does he really have to win that job long term?
I mean, listen, if he goes out on the field and performs, I don't know any head coach or anybody, GM in the league says, you know what, he's playing real good, but we're going to pull him back and not play him next year or anything like that. I mean, it's going to be a constant competition. And to me, competition and pressure brings the best out of anybody that I'd ever worked with or saw compete at any team I've been with the 5 organizations I played with. So, I mean, listen, he's going into this season as the starter. If he's not playing well or he sulks or doesn't show up or doesn't show that, he wants the guy to take control, he's going to leave a window cracked open for somebody else. And you know what? It might be, it could be a rookie. It could be Chase Daniels. Who knows? I mean, it's a new offense. It's a new coach. It's a new system. Everybody's trying to buy in and learn something new. And if he's not there and he's not fighting with these guys trying to get this team back where it needs to be and where they're used to being, then, he's not a solution to the problem. He's a hindrance.
Is there anything, though, you think, okay, have you ever been on a team where there was a veteran quarterback and someone got drafted high? Were you there when they drafted Sanchez?
Vinny Testaverde was the starting quarterback in New York Jets, and they drafted, a first-round quarterback in Chad Pennington. So, I mean, there was a pressure there, to go out there and perform. It's a similar situation. Now, Vinny's an older guy, but he was in his 13th year, so he played 8 more seasons. But that was a situation very similar.
So Bradford, which, again, I agree with you that he has not accomplished anything to say you deserve anything. But my question, I guess, for you as a guy who played, he signs a deal on the 1st under one narrative. They then change the narrative on him I guess I kind of feel like I can understand where he would be a little like, would he have not signed that deal at that time if they had the number 2 pick back on March 1st?
I mean, listen, who else was going to give him that kind of money in that situation? I mean, you only can kind of gauge on your future on what that moment offers you. I thought he got a healthy 2-year contract with that next year's contract guaranteed. I mean, listen, if he goes out there and lays it out there and does what he's supposed to do, he's going to see the second year of that, and he maybe wants to hold out and try to get a long-term deal. Maybe this full process starts over again. But you know what? At least he could sit back and say, you know what? I earned that. I earned the right to get that. And listen, you cannot have thin skin in this business. I mean, listen, I've been in several situations where I wasn't too happy on the message that was delivered to me. I was in Arizona my second season, and I had 2 other teams that offered me much more money than the Arizona Cardinals going into my 10th year. And I went with loyalty, and I went with a coach that I could trust because the message was clearly being told to me. And you know what happened? I got released that season. So, you know, a lot of things are said, a lot of things are done, but you got to go out there. Some circumstances are different. Mine wasn't a play thing. It was more of a cover the position. He's there. We can utilize him, and we can bring another guy, see how they go through training camp and see how they look, and we can maybe cut the cord with no obligation. Or they can say, listen, you're going to be the guy coming in day one. Go out there and do your thing. And the only way that we're going to pull that away from you is if the competition is better. And now it just happens to be if the second pick of the draft is a quarterback and he comes in, he's not going to get as many reps as Sam Bradford as long as he stays on pace and does what he does. So every opportunity is still there for Sam to be the guy going into this season and, you know, potentially moving forward. Who knows how he'll play this year if he decides to, you know, have this huge season. I mean, that decision has to be made, but at the end of the day, if the system fits, you're not going to change Sam Bradford or what's going on in Philly if they become successful.
Yeah, you know, that's where it's interesting. Okay, you're down in Tampa right now. You do the pre and the post game for Tampa. They draft Jameis Winston number 1. Let's say Mike Glennon had been in the league for 3 or 4 years and was okay, nothing special, but they didn't have Winston. They traded up to go get Winston, but he signed a deal not knowing that Winston was going to be there. It's like they kind of pulled the rug out from under him, and I feel like when you draft a guy 1 or 2, that the inference is this guy's got to play at some point, whether it's this year or next year. He's going to play whether you play well or not, and you don't lose your job based on what that guy's done to beat you. You lose your job based on where he was drafted.
Yeah, I think in the past that was maybe a bigger issue. I think if you can get a quarterback, second pick overall, you're spending $22 million over 5 years, which isn't that much money when you spread it out, and you get a year to kind of have him sit back and just try to better himself, not only as a quarterback playing a position, but just mentally what it takes to play in that game. Then your expectation levels rise. You know, over the year, you expect him to compete a little harder. He knows the system. I mean, listen, this could be a 2-year process. I mean, if Sam does his thing, if you're a player, you want to force the team to be in the pickle. You don't want to give them reasons to pull and take away from you. So if I'm Sam Bradford, I'm saying, you know what? Fine, go draft your guy. I'm going to come out. I'm balling out this offseason. I'm working my butt off. I'm going to come in prepared, come in firing in all cylinders. I'm going to know the system by the back of my hand, and I'm going to have a huge season. If he does that, he has a lot more, marbles in his corner than maybe a second first-year rookie does moving into the season. So to me, I think he still holds the cards. He's making a top-tier salary this year. Go out and do your job, and then if it doesn't work out and you want to hold out or something goes on, they want to trade, then the next year you got a little more leverage, I think, if you prove to this coach and the organization that with this new tenure, things work out better for you.
Yeah, and I agree. I'm very torn on this because I can see his thing. You're in a business like ours, Anthony, where, you know, somebody works across town, they have a non-compete clause, you sign your deal, and then the next thing you know, the guy comes in and, hey, by the way, this guy, you're out of here. I mean, you see it happen in our business all the time where someone just kind of sideswipes you out. So I do feel like when this opportunity – now, that being said, his agent last night said that basically he doesn't want to jump around. He doesn't want to be a placeholder. He wants to be a long-term guy. So people have said, well, he could
you
go.
got to go force the hand of the team on the field. That's the only thing that clears it all up for a player. You got to go on the field and be that guy. Everybody wants to be the guy. I wanted to be the tight end. Or this guy wants to be the player, but you're not going out there and living up to the expectation. You're not going to get that. There are no handouts in this business anymore. It's too much money getting thrown around, and especially at the quarterback position. You better be dead on, quote unquote, an elite guy or getting to that elite point, or there's always a chance that you could be replaced.
You're a player, Anthony. Did Tom Condon, as an agent, help Bradford with his comments?
Well, listen, Tom Condon works for Sam Bradford, so, he's going to talk to his client. He's going to, figure out where he stands in that situation, and he's going to have to support him, or he's not going to get his 3% at the end of the year. So, Tom Condon doesn't have to agree with everything that his clients might be deciding to do. And I don't know. I'm not in that circle with them, too. Nobody is, but he's going to back his client in that situation. So, to me, if I'm an agent, I'm thinking, dude, are you seriously? You want to pull back from this, and you want to kind of regress and say, all right, you want to be the guy, but you really quite didn't put. I mean, I don't know if he's going to have that kind of conversation. I think he'll lay it out there, but you know what? You don't want to lose a client either. So again, it's a tricky situation. I'm not really sure where Tom Condon leans internally, but of course he's going to stand up for his client and say the things that he has to say.
Anthony Becht's with us, of course, former NFL tight end, first-round pick of the New York Jets, does college football, ESPN. Give me your thoughts then on where the Eagles stay at number 2. Who do you like on this quarterback list? Are you a Wentz guy? Are you a Goff guy? Are you a wild card, somebody else guy? What is your quarterback rankings?
Well, I'll say this. Wentz and Goff, to me, are not 1 and number 2 picks in any draft, in my opinion. But if there's a need, you've got to do your due diligence and you go get your guy because the rookie scale is different. But that being said, how I rate my quarterbacks on my eyes and what I've seen, I think Connor Cook's the best quarterback of the bunch. Now, nobody's talking about him going 1 or 2. He's probably not. But I think he's in the world of he's a first-round kind of talent, and his game by far, in my opinion, translates to what the NFL quarterback is being asked to do, what he did at Michigan State. Now, there are some things with him as far as, he wasn't a captain and all those things. But, once that comes to light sometimes, that can change a guy. And what I see on the field, I did 2 Michigan State games live this year, and I watched every one of his passes the last 2 seasons. I mean, this kid's doing everything that I see a pro quarterback doing. Now, Wentz and Goff, Goff to me, I'm a little worried about it. Air raid offense kind of guy. You don't see a lot of successful quarterbacks coming out of that system. I just don't know if that stuff's going to quickly translate. You're going to see the same type of player. Plus, he didn't win too many games at Cal. I mean, he won his first 5, but I went out there and said when they were undefeated, he might not win another game after that, and ended up losing 5 straight games in Pac-12 play. So he's a guy that I think, to me, there's still question marks. And Carson Wentz, I mean, we can tag him and say, okay, Flacco came from the FCS school. He was successful. That's one guy, and he was a special kind of quarterback. Huge, big size. Wentz has all those tangible things you like and look at a quarterback, but the competition level's different. He was injured last season. I think that what he's being asked to do in college is pro style. But to me, I just think there's a lot more these 2 quarterbacks have to prove in my eyes to say they're 1 or 2. But at the end of the day, if you like a guy, especially in this day and age, and you make those moves, if you look in your little crystal ball and you look at quarterbacks coming in and what's there and every single season, it's just there's a limited batch of guys. And you got to, if you can feel that you can get a guy that's close to what you can build with, you got to go get him. And I think right now that's what the Rams and the Eagles are thinking.
So would you have made this deal for number 2 if you were Philly, or would you have just stayed at 8 where you were at if it was you?
I mean, I don't know if I give up this much for one of those 2 players, either of those. But again, it is what it is. I mean, this isn't the deepest draft of elite talent. I think there's good talent in this draft. I probably would not have made the trade. I think from a quarterback standpoint, I think a lot of these guys are kind of in the same boat where if something fell your way, you could maybe work with it. You might not find a top-tier talent, but I don't know if any of these guys are elite quarterbacks, per se, off what their film showed in college. Now, you might fall in love with them in the meetings and, your individual workouts, and that's all fine and dandy. But, again, the tape to me tells the story. And, a lot of these players like Wentz is a little bit incomplete because of the competition. Now, how much does that weigh into it? That's different for every team. To me, I just don't know if I would trade a buttload of picks like the Rams and like the Eagles did and try to say that one of these two quarterbacks can be the future of our franchise.
Yeah, Anthony Becht's with us, former NFL tight end, ESPN, college football. It's funny because I said this before. The fans always want somebody better. To me, there's 5 guys on planet Earth and that can play that position at the level a fan accepts. Brady, maybe Cam Newton, Russell Wilson, those guys, there's only 5 of them. If you're not one of those, like if the Eagles traded up and ended up getting an Andy Dalton type of guy, they're not happy with Andy Dalton, even though Andy Dalton's pretty good. Meaning these trades don't work out because the guy that you ultimately want doesn't exist. That guy doesn't exist. They're once-in-generational players that come around that you are happy with.
Well, the NFL draft, every single year, whether you're the number 1 pick or you're the final pick of the draft, is potential driven. None of these guys have done anything at the next level where you can put a stamp on it and say, they're the next Andrew Luck. Now, there are certain, decade-type players that come through that, you feel real good about, and I think everybody agrees with that. That's the guy. But those guys are rare. After that, man, it's a crapshoot. I mean, we're going to hear names in this first round this year, and in 3 years from now, we're going to be like, wait, that guy went in the first round? I mean, that's just common every single season. I think it diminishes even more when you're trying to get that top-tier guy. With the rookie pay scale, to me, I think you get a lot more value with other players, as you get into the second and third round. That's where you start building your team. And when you get those picks away, going back to what we talked about, I think sometimes that's where those good players you find because of your study and what you're seeing and those gems. Those are the ones that are going to ultimately change your team, like Devontae David in Tampa Bay. I mean, nobody was saying this guy was a stud. We get him in the third round. Same Quan Alexander, 4th round guy. I mean, those are the guys that all of a sudden, if those guys can make Pro Bowls and be elite players, that's where you win as an organization. And those are the picks right now that you've given away, and you got to hit on one guy. That's a lot at stake for one player.
Yeah, you look at Jordan Hicks last year for the Eagles. I mean, look, I covered you in college. I think it was surprising to me that all of a sudden, out of nowhere, you rose up to be a first-round pick. At what point did you know you would be a first-round pick, or was that, as you just said, potential-driven, that you were a big, strong, tight end in college? Was that a potential-driven type of pick?
Well, I think it was a 2-man show at the time. It was me and Bubba Franks. And at the time, Mel Kiper, really the only pundit at the time, had me like a late second, but maybe an early third after the season was over. And I had played injured through my senior year, but I understood the process, and a lot of young guys don't. I preach this to the tight ends that I trained the last 4 or 5 years, and I say, listen, step number 1 is your Senior Bowl. I went to the Senior Bowl, and I went up against the Julian Petersons, the Keith Bullocks, the Brandon Shorts, and I dominate these guys in those practice sessions. And all of a sudden, bam, there's a buzz. Now all of a sudden I'm moving up the charts. So I'm inching into that first-round conversation, and now it's my pro day. Now I got every single tight end coach and some head coaches at my pro day, and that's where you just got to, put the final piece on it and finish the deal. And I did that. I remember Pat Shermer ran my pro day. He was a tight end coach for the Eagles at the time. And, after my pro day, he told me, listen, I have no problem taking you at 6 if that was my call in Philly. I remember him specifically saying, I was like, wow, that's great. And I think that was the year you guys picked Corey Simon. So, it was just one of those things. I felt good about that situation. It was really, from my agent's perspective and around the league, half of the teams had Bubba Franks rated number 1, and half of the teams had me rated number 1. It was just a matter of where were we going to fall and who that team was going to be. And even to this day, when the Packers took Bubba Franks at 14, we had an inside that the Packers had me ahead of him, and they actually worked him out the day before the draft a third time, and ultimately he finally, who he had not been working out as well into the process, had a good work, and they just ended up taking him ahead of me. And then I knew Parcells. He told me flat out when I took a visit there, we're taking you. We like you over Bubba. It's just a matter of where you're going to go of those 4 first-round picks, and I was the last guy. So worked out great for me, but again, it's a process. The tape and everything that you're doing as a tight end is where it's going to really come down to. But when you start putting all those other things together and you start playing against elite talent in the Senior Bowls and you're competing against these guys who are projected top 10, top 15 picks, that's where you start, putting the cap and the lid on what you're trying to accomplish. And, I took advantage of the situation.
Good insight from 12-year NFL tight end Anthony Becht at Anthony_Becht, a college football analyst for ESPN. And who are a couple of guys in this draft that you really like that you have your eye on?
Man, I'll tell you, there's a lot of players. Quarterbacks, I told you, I'm a Conacook fan. From a running back's perspective, I really like Aaron Glenn out of TCU. Now, these aren't top-tier guys. These are guys in the middle rounds that I think can be effective in their first season. Wide receivers, Josh Doxson to me at TCU. I think he's the best receiver coming out. A lot of people have Treadwell and have Fuller. I think Doxson brings everything to the table, what you want in a big, strong receiver, can catch in space. Leonte Carew, a Rutgers guy, I think he's a guy that's going to make some noise in the NFL. Tight ends, I worked with Jarrell Adams. I thought he was in the top 10 starting out in the process. Right now, I have no problem pushing him right up behind Hunter Henry as the second best tight end in this draft, and he's proved it. He did the exact same things that I talked about. I like Jason Spriggs, tackle from Indiana. A lot of people have him at the top of the second, middle second. I like him. I think he's a 15 to 25 pick in my eyes. I love his athleticism, and he's a super athlete, number one, and he's physical also. I think he's someone that can be better than some of these other tackles because he's so athletic with these speed pass rushers at the next level. And I think the best pass rusher in the entire draft is Leonard Floyd out of Georgia. Now, he's an outside stand-up linebacker. We've seen a lot of guys like Bartavius Mingo, same kind of body type, fail because they're too small. Deion Jordan guys fail from Oregon. Two long 6'7" guys just didn't have the butt and the weight. But there's something about Leonard Floyd on tape, and they didn't use him as a pure pass rusher every single week at Georgia. I think he's a guy. If you look at the Ravens, I have him in my mock draft and my top guys on my Twitter feed. Guys can check it out, but I think that he'd be a good guy to plug in there. You got Suggs getting older, stepping in on that 3-4 system and being an impact player on the outside edge.
All right, more from Anthony Becht, and of course at Anthony_Becht. You can check out his mock draft there, and also and tell the listeners you're going to be back home for Delaware County. You have the Anthony Becht football camps coming sometime in July for the listeners out there that can get involved.
Yeah, July 18th, 19th, and 20th. It's a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. We have our 3-day camp, annual camp at Monsignor Bonner High School right outside Philadelphia. It's our 11th season. We've had over 75 NFL football players come through and work with these kids, and I try to bring some into town, trying to get some Eagles locked in. We'll have those on my website. You can sign up grades 1st through 8th grade. It's Anthony Becht, BECHT, footballcamp.com. Even though it's in July, guys, we're already at about 90 campers, and we cap out just about 150. So it's been sold out the last 3 seasons, and I expect it to happen again. We've got great support as far as sponsorships, and every time I call these sponsors, like Supercuts and Models and all these different companies and McDonald's locally, they instantly come back on board, for the 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th year in a row because they see what we're doing. And we don't teach the kids just football. We teach them life, and I think that's something right now that's been lacking across the board with some of the youth. I have 2 young kids, and it's a daily chore as a dad for a 10 and a 12-year-old. So I understand the struggles sometimes parents have, and this is a great camp to bring your kid, whether they're a premier football player or they're just trying to learn the game. We can mix them all together, and we can have a great time.
Yeah, and by the way, I'll tweet out the information for the people out there looking for it. We'll tweet that out from at 973 ESPN.
Now, Anthony, the gem of this interview, in my opinion, was I did hear you say that Mike Gill said he covered you in college. So what kind of journalist was Mike Gill back in those college days? What hard-hitting questions did he have?
I wasn't quite sure he was going to get into this field. I will say this. He thought he had a 3-point shot on our intramural basketball team, but I could never see him ever making any good, important shots in any of those games that would move us to the next level in those basketball games.
Hey, come on, man. That game on the Final Four game that we got ran off the floor, they were boxing one of me because I was draining the triple.
Well, yeah, and I fouled out in the first half. There were 6 teachers, right? They were like 30 to 50-year-old teachers.
They ran us
off
the floor.
Woo! They were like the Spurs out there. It was ugly, but it was good times, man. I'll tell you, you're doing a great job. It's always a pleasure to come on.
Yeah, man. Good stuff out of you, and we'll catch up with you soon. We missed you down in Florida this year.
Yeah, no doubt. But I'll be in Jersey for the summer. I hit them beaches up all with my family. Still go down to Ocean City and Wildwood and stuff like that.
Nice.
So it's always a good time.
All right, man. Anthony Becht, former NFL tight end, at Anthony_Becht. Thanks, pal.
You got it. See you guys.